we're on 49A, the very top of the page. We're in the middle of discussing the exceptions to the, it's not quite time yet. Let's see if I won't start for another minute. Maybe, what's his name? We'll join this too. Stand by. Okay, let's begin. So, in the middle of discussing the exceptions to, if any, to the rule that a Nazir and or a Kohen Gadol, under what circumstances can they violate the usual stricture against becoming tamei, right? So we're looking at different permutations. What if a person is both a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol? What are the details about this? So we saw yesterday that Rabbi Akiva. So the key verse here is the kind of general rule about for a Kohen Gadol, which is al kol nafshos meis lo yavo laviv v'limo lo yitama. A Kohen Gadol can't even become tamei to his mother or father, and a regular Kohen says laviv v'limo lachiv lachoso, his mother and father, his brother and sister. He should not become tamei. No, sorry, that's the Kohen Gadol, right? Mother, father, brother, and sister. Even for those instances of death in the family, the Kohen Gadol has to still not become tamei. So we've been examining why all these different words. Why are all these listed separately? So Rabbi Akiva said that the word lachiv, that the Kohen Gadol can't even become tamei to his brother's body. That actually teaches us that a Kohen Gadol who is also a Nazir does become tamei for a meis mitzvah. Remember, a meis mitzvah is someone who's a body who has no one to care for it, right? There's no apparent family, or might be someone who's not with his family. Family is not present. You find the dead body, and there's no one to take care of it. So that becomes a meis mitzvah. It's a mitzvah for you, the person who encounters the body, to look after its burial. Okay, so for that, true, Mr. Kohen Gadol, who is also a Nazir, you cannot become tamei to a family member like your brother, okay? But you can become tamei. You must actually become tamei to this meis mitzvah, someone who has no one to deal with their body. Michte, Loshna Kohen Gadol l'chudei, Loshna Kohen Gadol b'hu Nazir. Nafka mi lachiv. So, according to Rabbi Akiva, this applies not only to a person who is a Kohen Gadol and also became a Nazir, but even one or the other, right? So, laviv v'limo lamali. So then, what do you have? Why does the Torah have to specify your father and mother? Because we saw earlier that the phrase for your mother, which one was it? No, the mother we use for the Gzer Shava, for to equate the Kohen and the Nazir, the Kohen Gadol and the Nazir. But the father, like, what do you need that for if that's covered by lachiv, right? So why else do you need both? If the Torah had only said, yes, you can become tamei to your father, you know why we're not so concerned about your why the Torah only wrote your father? Because obviously your mother, right, is a close relative, right? But your father, how do you know really that your father is your father? Okay, when your mother gives birth to you, it's an observable event, right? That she is your mother. But the idea that your father is your father, like how do you know who impregnated your mother? Like there's no witnesses presumably to that event, right? Um, and in general, we use a chazaka, right? We say that from a halakhic perspective, unless you have evidence to the contrary, we assume that the person that your mother is married to is the person who got her pregnant and who is your father. Okay, um, but that's only a presumption. About email the young but your mother, who it's patently obvious, it's an observable event that she gave birth to you. The Tamil, yeah, you should become tummy to your mother because that's a certainty that she's your close relative. So even though you're a Kohen Gadol, you're a Nazir, still your mother is your mother, right? But your father is probably your father, right? So maybe you would not otherwise say that you should become Tani to your father. Therefore, the Torah has to add in, you know what? Don't, Mr. Kohen Gadol, don't become Tame to even to your father. Um, there's a side note. There's probably apocryphal story. One of these stories about I heard the name that it was about Rav Chaim of Brisk, but it's apocryphal, so it probably could be about anybody. Um, as a precocious 6-year-old child, and they asked him. So the Gemara indicates that if there's a conflict, you have to honor your father and your mother, right? What if there's a conflict between their wishes, or the circumstances in which by honoring one you would be dishonoring or disobeying the other? So I can't remember if it's a Gemara or if it's a later source. It says, you know what, your mother also has to honor your father, right? So therefore you should go with what your father says, right? Because your mother is also in a sense subservient to your father. So therefore there's a conflict, go with what your father says. So they asked him, well, wait a minute. Your father is according to the theory we just said, which is the Gemara has elsewhere, your father is only assumed to be your father, but your mother is certainly your mother. So that should override, right? You should definitely have to honor your mother, and only probably have to honor your supposed father, right? So why does the Gemara why does Allah take the opposite path? So he answered, well, that wouldn't be to suggest that your father is not really your father would not really be honoring your mother, would it? Okay. Anyway, so all right. So I would have thought that if the Torah only wrote your father, because maybe your mother you actually do have to become Tamei too, because she's certainly your mother. Therefore, the Torah writes your mother and your father. Because of Rahmanim. Also, if the Torah had only written that you don't become Tamei to your mother's body, Avamina loli Tamei la, the love Azul Zarabas, right? You know what? Sure, she's certainly your mother, but in another sense, it's not. She doesn't have as close a connection to you as your father does, because in certain aspects of family law, like what who you inherit from, what tribe you belong to, your kind of your tribal identity, you get that from your father, not your mother. So in that sense, your connection to your father is stronger than your connection to your mother. So lonely coming the love Oswald Darabas, right? If so maybe I would assume that why, if the Torah had only written you don't become Tamei to your mother and had not commented about your father, you would think, oh, you know why you don't become Tamei to your mother? Because she's not as strongly connected to your identity, to you, as your father is. But your father's father, even though you're a Kohen Gadol or a Nazir, then you should actually become Tamei to your father's body. So, since your connection to your father is stronger because that's your tribal identity, so maybe because of the closeness of that connection, you would say you would become Tani to your father. So therefore, the Torah says, your father and your mother don't become Tani. Okay, so that explains Rabbi Akiva why it has to say both your mother and your father. Okay, now what about the following verse, which we commented on yesterday? The Al Nashos Meis Lo Yava. The again dealing with the Kohen Gadol. So now we've dealt with the details: your mother, your father, sister, your brother. But what about the general rule, which is stated there? Remember, the Torah starts by saying the Kohen Gadol Al Kol Nashos Meis Lo Yava. Don't become tamei to any dead body. So what's that about? What does that add to the conversation? So I'll call to every lachuke rechokim. Means don't become. We're going to break up this phrase into its component parts. So to every, that refers to people you're not related to. I'll call mace, dead body, lachuke krobim. That means don't even become tamei to a relative. And nafshos, when it says I'll call nafshos mace to any dead souls, lachuke, what could that possibly include? What is that telling you not to become tamei to as a kohen gadol? Lachuke revis dam sheyasu mishnei mason. What if you have a mixture of blood? Right. Remember, the minimum amount of blood that makes you tamei is a revis. It's like, what is it, 3 or 4 ounces, right? What if the 3 or 4 ounces of blood actually comes from 2 separate people, 2 separate bodies, right? So in general, we would say they do not combine to make you tamei. But in the case of, the difference here, if you touch it, come in contact with it, it does make you tamei. But remember, there's a rule about dead bodies that if you're in the same room, under the same roof as them, it's called tumas ohel, you're in the same tent, in the same room, then as a dead body, then you become tamei. But if it's a minimum amount of blood that is a mixture of blood from 2 bodies, then if you're in the same room as that doesn't make you tamei. However, what it's telling you, the Kohen Gadol, by saying I'll call nafshos meis lo yavo, about dead bodies you shouldn't come in contact with, that extra word bodies means that he should not even come into the same room as this mixture of 3 ounces of mixture of blood from 2 people. So getting pretty granular. Okay, and that's where we leave that discussion. Okay, next Mishnah. Al elu tumos hanazir megaleach. What is a Nazir liable for? What kind of tumah is he forbidden to come into contact with? Al hames, dead body. Al kazayis hames, or even an olive volume of the dead body. The Gemara will discuss at length. What does this add, or what does al hames add? If you know that an olive's volume you can't come in contact with, certainly a whole dead body, right, is included. The Gemara will discuss that. Al kazayis netzel. So netzel, kazayis of netzel. What is netzel? Netzel, the Gemara also will discuss at length. But it's some kind of a congealed, liquefied. As the body begins to break down, it becomes it decomposes, it melts, it becomes kind of liquidy or more like a gel. So that we'll call netzel. The almalot tarvad reka, a spoon, a ladle full of reka, like decomposed, rotted. Here, the art school translation is corpse dust. Okay, so like once the body is all dried up, it becomes a dried, kind of desiccated. The flesh of it anyway becomes kind of dried and desiccated. We call it corpse dust or reka. So that you can also not become tamei too. Al hashidra ve'al guzalas. The spinal column or the skull is sufficient to be considered a dead body that makes you tamei. Then Nazir is forbidden from becoming tamei too. Al aver min hames, or a complete limb from the body. The al aver min achai, or even a complete limb from a person who's still living. So, God forbid you have a limb amputated, then that, even though the the person is still alive, that limb is something that would make one tamei, and the Nazir is forbidden from contacting. Sheyesh alav basar karai. All of these things, if they have, meaning the skull or the spinal column or the limb, as long as yesh alav basar karai, there's still enough flesh on it that if it were still attached to the body, then it would, regenerate or heal, right? So, in other words, if it's just a bone with almost no meat left on it, then even if it were still attached, it would not heal, right? And the skin wouldn't grow back, let's say. But if there is enough of the flesh still on the bone or on the limb or the skull or the spinal column, then that does make it tummy. The chatzi kav atzamos, half a kav of bones. The chatzi log dam, half a log of blood, which we said before, like 6 or 7 ounces. The al magan, the al masan, the al ahiyatman. All of these things, the Nazir becomes tameh, and it affects his Nazirus if he touches them, carries them, or is in the same room as them. The al esam kasara, what about a little piece of bone, even as small as a barley grain? Al magavi al maso, just for touching or carrying it, but to the small piece of bone, the rules about being in the same room do not apply. So all these things, a Nazir cuts his hair, and we usually use cutting your hair as a short form for the following, for the whole ritual of the ending of a period of Nazir. So Megaleach, you cut your hair, and you undergo the sprinkling of the blood on the 3rd day and the 7th day. And whatever period of Nazirus that you're in the middle of is interrupted. You have to redo. And you can only start counting again the number of days of Nazirus once you become tahar again, who maybe is korbanosov, and bring your the sacrifices that are part of the ritual of the ending of Nazirus. Okay, so pretty comprehensive view of what a Nazir is or is not allowed to become tameh. After Rabbi Meir passed away, so Rabbi Meir was the generation of the first full generation of Tanaim after the destruction of the temple. So presumably this is like the middle of the 2nd century or so. Rabbi Yehuda said to his students, I don't want to let anybody from the students of Rabbi Meir into my shir, because they're difficult people. They're troublemakers. And they're not sincere in learning Torah. That's not their purpose. They're just trying to come and trip me up, right? They're going to hear something I say. They're going to find some halacha that appears to contradict it, and they're not really interested in arriving at the truth. They're interested in starting an argument. So Tzimchus, who was one of the primary talmidim, primary students of Rabbi Meir, he pushed his way into Rabbi Yehuda's shir anyway. So he said to them, and Tzimchus says, "Kachshanli Rabbi Meir." This is what Rabbi Meir taught me about this Mishnah. Al elu tumas hanazir medaleach, al hameis v'al tais min hameis. He basically quoted our Mishnah, right? That the Nazir has his Nazirus counseled by coming into contact with either a full dead body or a kazayas of a dead body. So Rabbi Yehuda heard this and he got angry. Lo kach amarti lachem. Didn't he said to students, "What did I tell you? Al yikansu told me they were married with time. They should come turn hands. See, I told you that they're just troublemakers. Who let this guy Silkos in?" And you can see he's just here to cause trouble because this can't be the right reading of the Mishnah. Makes no sense because, as I said, just tell me about the kazais min hames, and I'll understand the full mace. Of course, is certainly going to make it come. I'm Rabbi Yossi, so Rabbi Yossi is in the crowd, and he's listening. He says, what am I going to do? I have an answer, but Yomru, Meir Shachab, people will say, if I say nothing, then people will say Meir Shachab, or Meir died. Yehuda Kazman, Yehuda is, he's angry. And Yossi Shasek, and I, Rabbi Yossi, who has, something to contribute to this discussion, I'm going to be part of this disreputable dispute here by not speaking up. And what we're really involved in is trying to get to the bottom of what the Torah wants from us, right? So if I don't speak up, I'm just going to become part of this circus sideshow in which it appears to be driven by ego or by there's clearly something amiss here. It's not an ideal Socratic type of discussion. There's clearly some feelings being expressed here, and I don't want to be part of that, so I'm going to speak up. I'm Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi answers, oh, we're talking about a dead body, like when the Mishnah says you can't become tame to a kazayis of flesh, right? Or a dead body that doesn't even have a kazayis of flesh. That's what it's talking about. Now, this isn't entirely satisfactory because, then you still kind of have the skeleton that makes you tame anyway. So it's not entirely clear to me how he's answering the question. But he is trying to, he's suggesting another interpretation of the Mishnah that would accord with Rabbi Meir and would satisfy Rabbi Yehuda. So Vadayin Yomer, so the Gemara questions that Rabbi Yehuda could still counter as follows. Later in the Mishnah, we see that a single limb is enough to make you tamei as a Nazir. So what do you have again? Why do you need to tell me the general rule that the whole body makes you tamei? Even one limb makes you tamei. So of course the whole body makes you tamei. So again, Rabbi Meir's version of this Mishnah, which is our version of this Mishnah, it must be, incorrect or imprecise. Ella, so Gemara answers kind of taking the same position as Rabbi Yossi, but they have to come up with an explanation for this. But it goes in a different direction and how to do so. We're going to go with what Rabbi Yossi said. When we say a whole body, that can't become coming to a whole body, we're talking about a fetus, a miscarried fetus that was not, kind of complete. It's still developing. The limbs are not really connected strongly to the rest of the body. Now, exactly, what this means anatomically, I have no idea. But the idea seems to be that, yes, there is a case where a limb, where you can say that a limb makes you tamei, and it's not related to the fact that the whole body makes you tamei, because the limb here was never an integral part of the body. So we'll use that idea to explain here why a limb is different than a limb can make you tamei even if it's not part of a whole body, or was never part of the whole body. Rava is a different answer. When it's Shein Behen Rov Atzama, sorry. What we're talking about is where you have so a skeleton, when it's how much of a skeleton makes one tamei, it has to be most of the kind of structure of a human being, which I think we take to understand like the torso. So you have most of the torso and most of the number of bones. Like if you have, I don't know how many bones are in the human body, but if you have the majority of them, but still she'en behen rov atzamos. But that doesn't come up to the minimum measure of a quarter kav of bones, right? So it could be, maybe a very small person or a baby, right? Where, even all the bones in there would not amount to the measure that we usually use for how much bone is considered to make you tame. So that's why the Mishnah would be telling you these two separate things. Either a whole body, so like this kind of very small body where by the usual measures it wouldn't make you tame, but since it's a whole body, it makes you tame. Or the other things, a single limb or a kezias of flesh. That's how we understand the Mishnah. What the Mishnah is adding by saying a whole dead person, a whole dead body makes you tame. Okay, clear? So we will stop here for today, and tomorrow we will investigate what is this netzel, this kind of liquefied remains of the body.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
You too. Thank you.
You have a good day.
Bye.